Hello everyone. Welcome to the Middle Road with Nishant Malhotra for another riveting podcast. Today I talk to Larry Johnson from United States of America, who is a fundraising guru within the sustainable development sector. A graduate of Yale University, Larry is the author of the award-winning book The 8 Principles of Sustainable Fundraising, and based on the Wall Street Business Network, ranked among the top 15 fundraising consultants in the United States. Larry specializes in nonprofit development, fundraising, and philanthropy, and serves on multiple nonprofit and corporate boards. Significantly, the Philanthropic Council of the Charter Center, the philanthropic arm of Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of United States. This podcast focuses on the importance of relational fundraising and philanthropy within the social ecosystem and shares tips for everyone. A very warm welcome. Great to have you on the platform.
It's a pleasure, Nishant. Thank you for inviting me.
The fantastic thing is Larry stays with his wife near Boise, Idaho, and loves outdoor activities like riding, hiking, skiing, horse riding, and snowshoeing in the Rocky Mountain. We also were great enough to share one of the photographs. It was just lovely, out of the world, very picturesque. Yeah, I start. You've done so many things. You've worked. You've worn multiple hats. Now, today, when we discuss the most significant aspects of the companies within the social ecosystem, fundraising would be right there on the top. With the most quintessential question when I ask you, what drove you to choose fundraising as a career after your degrees in electrical engineering? You have a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering.
Well, I'll take the example of Steve Jobs when he said it's really difficult, if not impossible, to connect the points going forward, but you can always connect them looking backward. And so I do have the electrical engineering degrees. I also have the theological degree, which is the relational side. And for many fundraisers, and I'm one of those, you got into the business as a mid-career shift. It was something that they grew to like or understand as they got a little older. And for me, I was an alumni volunteer for my alma mater, and I was enjoying it well. I was working for Westinghouse, which was a large corporation. I'm not a corporate guy per se. And someone said to me, Larry, referring to my volunteer service, you can do this for a living. And that was a revelation to me. And so I began to investigate it, and yes, it's true. And I was very, very blessed because I began my fundraising career working for Ketchum, which at that time was the world's largest fundraising consultancy, the oldest. And I worked for them for 7 years, and I learned the business primarily from the senior people that were working there. So that's how it came to be. And so when you're in the right place, you really know you're in the right place.
Okay, that's great. You have also published a book. It's an award-winning book, The 8 Principles, wherein you share your mantra on the 8 steps for a holistic fundraising initiative. Now, there is it's a very interesting statistic you have. You have mentioned that 90% of all the philanthropic dollars in the US are from individuals. So from your experience, how true you think this is across globally?
Well, let's go back and look at what philanthropy is. Philanthropy is about people investing in other people. That's really what it's about. And so, yes, in the United States, if you combine all the sources of philanthropy, which would include living individuals, deceased individuals' bequests, organized foundations, and corporate gifts, those are sort of the categories that they're recorded in. If you look at all that, about 90% of it comes from individuals, either through individuals that are currently alive, through bequests, or through their own individuals' family foundations, as opposed to an independent foundation. And the reason for that is that the philanthropic impulse is an individual one. So even when you're looking at a corporate gift or an independent foundation gift, the procedures are more standardized, they're more structured, but it's still people that are involved. So it's ultimately a relational process. So to answer your question, yes, I think in other parts of the world, as their philanthropic markets begin to mature, you're going to see the same sort of pattern. Now, right now, in some places like India, for instance, individual giving is small, and that's because historically it's not been stressed. I think you're going to see that begin to change with some of the changes in the laws in India and some of the economic factors that are driving it. Yes.
Yeah, I think philanthropy is also getting big. You're correct. I mean, it's much more bigger in the Western world, but it's starting to go up there and around Asia. So when you're talking about sustainable fundraising, alignment of the mission and the vision of the social actor is very critical, as you mentioned within your framework. Now, this is universally true. However, we like to articulate your thoughts here, maybe supplemented by lucid examples when you talk about this relationship.
Well, yes, because principle is that donors are the drivers. And what that means simply is that donors are the engine, the vectors behind philanthropy, whether they're individual donors or they're corporate donors. They're driving this engine. And then so that their values, what they're looking for, is what the organization should begin to identify so that when it works best, I, as a nonprofit or an NGO, I'm looking for individuals or corporations or other entities out there who share my values and my goals. And so the key is when the two are merged together. And that's why it's the case. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but do you have any example from practical life where you could share sort of, which could help connect the dots which you mentioned?
Let me see here. Here's one. Historically, the March of Dimes, which is an organization in this country, was established for the fight of polio. And of course, polio in this country was defeated in the early 50s with the introduction of the vaccine. And so then the original mission of the March of Dimes was satisfied. All right. So, but instead of going away, for instance, they could have said, okay, we've done our job. Let's disband, do something else. They decided as an organization to pivot their mission to one of overall birth defects, you see. So it was a wider, broader mission, and they shifted it. So when they did that, they had to begin to engage donors on that new basis. And that meant identifying a somewhat different pool of potential supporters that saw that as their mission. There's an example of how a major nonprofit actually shifted their mission to donors.
Okay. You mentioned a lot on the relationship with donors and givers. So when you design a campaign, do you always work on building up a collaborative model, which is fine-tuning the mission of the venture with that of the donors? You have some sort of example where you fine-tune, as a donor, I go, okay, maybe we don't have the exactly same sort of vision, but let's fine-tune it.
The way that works best, Nishant, is building a nonprofit organization that's successful financially over time is what I would call an inside-out affair. You begin with those people that are closest to you, both by sharing your values and your mission, and then also their relationship with the organization. And once you have that core, then it's not a question of so much redefining yourself for donors. It's not that. It's a question of finding like-minded people who share the mission you've already established. See the distinction I'm making?
Okay, so but is there a scope that we could realign some of the mission or vision? Let's say it's not 100% match, but you say, okay, there's a scope, there's an overlapping subset here. Let's go ahead and we can do something.
Well, yes. You're going to have, there's, first of all, philanthropy is an elastic variable. There's plenty of money out there, number one. In this country, hundreds of millions of dollars are left on the table every year. And the reason is because donors are not engaged properly. They're not, brought in properly, which I think addresses a little bit of what you're talking about. So it's not a matter of flipping who you are or reinventing yourself. It's a matter of identifying the people who share what you're trying to achieve. That's a little different task.
You have worked with multiple set of actors. There are so many actors within the social ecosystem. You worked in university, you worked at Niagara University, you worked with College of Idaho. Now, when you're also serving as a board member on the Philanthropy Council of the Charter Center. What do you think are the nuances, differences, how you interact and in their giving different actors?
Well, I'm sure some would disagree with me, but I think there are more similarities than there are differences. I mean, the difference, of course, is in the mission. The differences are somewhat cultural or geographical, but fundamentally, what drives the engine is the same thing, and that is people coming together to accomplish something that they could not do alone. That's the critical piece. Whether you're on the organizational side or you're on the donor side, neither group can do what can be done together alone. So they have to come together in relationship with each other. And this is so very important when it comes to raising money, because many nonprofits, well-meaning nonprofits, their model is their mental model is different. They think fundraising is a matter of going out to get the money and bringing it back to their organization to do what they want to do. That's not what it is. I mean, they'll be somewhat successful, but they'll never get the kind of success they could get if they instead, their mental model was, all right, how can we attract donors to us? And together, we make something happen that we couldn't do alone. And that means, of course, involving donors in a way that some organizations, they like the money, but they don't want the relationship. It doesn't really work that way, not for very long.
The pandemic, the COVID-19 has been a huge disruptor. So when you think about, you talk a lot about relationship, which is so important between the donor and the giver. Now, how do you think it's going to change, within the donor community? What sort of behavioral changes you will do? For example, you had Warren Buffett and Mackenzie Scott, she dedicated a lot of money, donated a lot of money this year in a very different manner. So the times maybe have changed. What changes do you think nonprofits and social entrepreneurs have to incorporate within the changing times?
First of all, I want to give reassurance to a lot of nonprofits that think that this virus has somehow shrank or diverted their potential philanthropic base. That's not the case. What we've seen in this country is that giving for all causes, for all types of organizations, has risen. Yes, there's specific people who are attracted to fighting the virus, and so they are focusing their dollars on that. That's good. But also, others have stepped up their donations so that the organizations and the missions they really hold dear will continue. Now, in terms of long-term changes, I think what you'll probably see is more of a use of online tools like what you're using today, for instance. You'll see some of that. You'll see less dependency, hopefully, and I'm saying hopefully, on large-scale fundraising events. And we could talk about events for a long time, but events in this country are largely misused. They're used as primary revenue generators, and that's not really the best use of events. The best use of events is to draw people into your organization, but they're often used just to generate revenue, and there's lots of reasons why that's not a good idea. But that's where a lot of organizations are. But that's going to change, and then also, as I said, more online features. But what will not change are people's desire to help other people and people's desire to be in relationship with other people. That is as old as creation. And one of the things, I know we're going to talk about India a little bit later on, but that's one of the things, as I've gotten to know the Indian people, that really attracts me, is that the Indian culture is primarily a relational culture. They really want to get to know you. And that, to me, is very fertile ground for very strong philanthropy if it's approached in the right way.
You came out with quite a few interesting details. You came out with a lot of insights. Now, my question now, as a follow-up to what you said, you have said that the sort of donation on the giving has not gone down. You think more number of donors have come in, or the ticket size among the donors has gone up? Of course, healthcare is one sector where a lot of donations have come in around the world, and that's fair enough. But when you talk about philanthropy going up, the giving going up, is because more number of individuals are coming, or the ticket size, like I said, as we think it's gone up?
Well, it kind of depends on what sector you're looking at. I think in some sectors, the number of donors, at least in this country, I can't speak for India, but in this country, the number of donors in some sectors has gone down, even as the total has gone up. That that distresses me a little bit because although historically, in terms of dollars or rupees, the bulk of the funds come from a relatively small group of people. That's always been the case. They alone will not drive a healthy philanthropic program. You have to have the smaller donors. They are just as important, but for a different reason. And the reason why is if you have a lot of small donations that are broadly distributed, you have community legitimacy. You have community support, which is critical to maintaining long-term sustainability. And at the same time, the larger donors, those who have much more resource and can be more generous, not more generous, but they can give more. And generosity is a matter of percentage, it's not a matter of dollars. That then they drive the amount, but they don't create the legitimacy. And that's why both big and small donors have to be a part of the mix.
Another very important statistics which I need to share. Now, there's a lot of, we talked about behavioral change. There's also been a rise of Generation Z. Generation Z are those who are born between 1995 to 2010, and they comprise about 20% of the working population. Now, this particular Generation Z, relies a lot also on the social media. I mean, many of them, I think I read somewhere that 96% of them have a smartphone now. I think that statistics valid for US. I'm not sure if that's statistics for the US, but that's
a lot.
yeah. So how do you think the philanthropy will evolve in the present times? Do you think a lot of technology use is coming in, a lot of tech savvy ways of?
Well, here again, technology will change the channels of communication. It won't change the need to communicate. And, with younger people, one of the trends I have noticed is that when I first got into this business, which was 30 years ago, you never really got what I would call an outcome or effectiveness question from a potential donor unless they were giving at least in the six figures in US dollars. Now, with the younger generations, you're getting those kinds of questions for relatively small donations, $50. For instance, and what that would be, 500 rupees, 400 rupees, something like that. I'm trying to do my math in my head, all right? And so they're demanding much more accountability from the organizations they support than people in my generation did, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. And the other thing that you're seeing more is this sort of gray area called social entrepreneurship, where it's not true philanthropy in that sense, but it has a philanthropic driver because it's focused on a philanthropic cause, but they're using a business model to do it with. So that's that sort of gray area. And I think you're going to see more of that as we go forward.
You also feel like, isn't it, that more accountability and transparency has come by over a period of generation as the society has evolved? That is also one of the reasons, like as more technologies and enabling, there's more information out there that maybe accountability and transparency is like driving the philanthropy today.
Yeah, I mean, that's the technology has been a driver for that sort of thing because you have much more information. I have a young woman that works with me, and I'm in the age of look it up in a book, and I'll say, Danielle, what about XYZ, and she'll go, well, I'll just Google that, and I'm going, oh, really? I just like, okay, I've gradually gotten into it.
I mean, you're having new channels of like crowdfunding and other things which are also sort of enabling fundraising.
Yes.
To an extent. I'll come to the Rocky Mountain question, which is like I really want to you also showed me a photograph, and that I'll come a bit later. When you mentioned the importance of principle, paradigm, and process for laying semblance for an effective fundraising outreach. Now, that is the three parts you've very specifically talked about. Now, this process needs to be measured for flaws. So do speak about any innovation within this segment when you're talking about.
Well, in this country, and I think it's pretty typical, most nonprofit organizations, with regard to their fundraising, are very much focused on process. How do we do this? What method do we do? How do we kind of grind through it day to day? And that's okay. And that's ultimately where life happens. I understand that. But if you're engaging in processes, you're choosing the way you're doing this without a knowledge of the universal principles that are out there, and that's what we talk about in the principles, you're very likely to be doing things that are working against yourself without even knowing it, that you're kind of pushing uphill all the time. Because, in fact, not understanding the right principles is one of the primary reasons that people have such anxiety about fundraising. Oh, you expect me to go out and ask for money? Well, first of all, it's not about money. We can talk about that. It's about something else entirely. But so that when you first understand the principles of fundraising, those that are universal, that apply in India as well as they apply here, then you can take that knowledge and understanding, and then knowing your own organization or your paradigm, how you fit, you can choose the methods that work for you. I'll give you a very concrete example. Something I didn't know until I was approached to come to India. In this country, direct mail fundraising is really, really big. It's a billion-dollar business in this country. Mailing out pieces of mail, people sending donations back. Even with the advent of online fundraising, you still have a huge direct mail business here. There's no such thing as direct mail in India that I didn't know about until I talked to them. I have friends that are Indians that live here now. Oh, Larry, no. We would call and get the donation, and then we'd send a runner out to get it, and then they'd bring it back. Well, there's a difference in method there, but the principle is still operating. You see the difference? And so that's what I'm saying is, the principles are universal. And then once people understand what they really are, they can create a program that works for them in their setting and make it very effective.
Okay. And you think this is more on the global lines? This is not only for the US, but sort of holds around the world globally?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the reason for that is human nature is remarkably consistent. That's the key, because we're talking about people here. And it goes across cultures, it goes across religion, it goes across geography, political systems. People are people. They have the same primary motivators and desires for their lives and what they want to achieve. And so if you understand that, then these philanthropic principles are applicable, whether it's in this country or in India. And then once you know what they are and really appreciate them, as opposed to just repeat them, all right, then you can say, oh, okay, well, I'm in India, or I'm in Africa, or I'm somewhere else. So I'll have to adjust that principle with a method that works for me, you see, and that's the key.
Now, you talk about how the human nature is consistent around the world. Now, you're also launching your operation in India. What sort of overlaps and differences in your work you see when you compare your work in the US and when you compare it with your work in India?
Well, I'll give you a little history. I'm not the one who had this idea. I was approached by an individual who is now our representative in India. The man's name is Sachin Mahadik, and he lives in Mumbai. And he reached out to me and he said, Larry, you need to bring the 8 principles to India. Well, I knew very little about India, and I could position it on a map. I knew a little bit about your history, but I didn't know much more. And I was going, all right, so how's this going to work? And then he explained it to me. So, you fast forward many, many months, and we've been working at it for over a year now. The U.S. Embassy will be sponsoring 3 events for us, and when the country opens again, probably sometime in the spring, maybe early summer. And one in Mumbai, one in Delhi, and one in Bangalore. So we're going to be promoting the platform through those meetings. So that how is it going to be changing? Well, first of all, one thing that we've had to really fine tune is the price structure for the services. The price structure will be very different than it is in the US, obviously. You have a lot of very, very small nonprofits there. So how do we create a delivery system that works in that environment as opposed to here? You also have a CSR component in India, which I think with the recent changes in legislation there, I think will become a more effective engine for making community changes. And so one of the things that A Principles will be positioned to do is to create a communications link between CSRs and NGOs. Right now, what we hear is that CSRs will say to us, the nonprofits don't know how to talk to us. And then the nonprofits will say, the CSRs don't know how to talk to us. And so there's this lack of understanding between the two groups. And so what the Eight Principles does, it provides that link. So we'll be working on that as well. So then our market in India will be primarily CSRs and NGOs or NGO associations, where in this country, our market is primarily fundraising coaches and nonprofits. So it's a little bit different in the way it's delivered. But yes, so you're looking at a difference, and we're going to be also, we're right now looking at creating, in this country, we have an advisory board, an Eight Principles advisory board called the Fellows, and Sachin serves on that board. And then we're going to be creating a similar group for Indians. And those are people who really understand and believe in what we're trying to achieve and are our primary advisors for India. Because one thing that Sachin has been invaluable for me, I'm learning the Indian culture. I'm learning about the Indian people, and he's been very, very helpful in helping me navigate that and understand it. Because that's what I really want to do, is be able to introduce this in an effective way for them.
When you look at, you talked about, you're coming to India, what sort of, figures or market size, what exactly are you looking? Are you looking at a particular size of nonprofit where you think you're going to go and approach them, or it's going to be put in different buckets? How are you going to be approaching those?
Well, where we stand now, and our thinking might change a little bit before we actually get there. But right now, I think what we're looking at, there's sort of three tiers of nonprofits in India. The very large sort of international organizations that everyone's familiar with, and then the middle range, which has maybe enough staff and a full-time fundraiser and some other people there, and then the very small ones, of which there are a great many of those. Now, the key has been, how do we make this available to those who need it most, which primarily will be the mid-range and the small range of nonprofits. So the mid-range will be able to probably afford this on their own, but the small nonprofits, what our current thinking there is a lot of these are in federations or associations. And so then the way we would do it there would be to make this material available to their association or their federation, so they could disseminate it from. Because the good news is this approach is applicable whether you're a very small nonprofit or you're a big one. Because they are principles that transcend size, culture, same things work. In fact, let me rewind a little bit in my career. When I was working for the consulting firm, we still have a handful of firms like that in this country. They have their business model is very highly paid individual consultants who go personally and work with a client. That's expensive. That's really expensive. Even in this country, that's expensive. And so the kind of clients they can work with are usually the ones that are doing pretty well already. They've got some momentum on them. But one thing I learned, Nishant, when I was working for Ketchum, is that what they were telling their clients applied whether you were very well heeled or you're very small. It's the same principle. It's what I learned. And so one of the things I've always wanted to do in my career was to make this more widely available, this understanding, because organizations don't start full blown. They don't start really big. All right. They start small. And the ones that become large and established are the ones that follow these principles. It's that easy. And so, but if you don't know what they are, you just either you kind of fall into it or you struggle, and over time maybe get part of it. And I want to try to accelerate that process.
Very good. You shared quite a few inputs. Now, when you're looking at these nonprofits, what do you plan to? I mean, you'll be sort of training them, or is it also you'll be connecting them to the donors from around the world? How?
What we will be doing is training them how to do their own fishing. All right, that's the key. We're going to be training people to fish. And the way we deliver our material is that once we have trained someone inside that organization, and it doesn't take long, the actual training material is available to them and they can train their own people over and over and over and over again. So actually we have put it inside the organization and then they can teach other people how to fish. That's the way it is. So they don't have to keep coming back to me or our team and say, come train us again. No, we have trained them and then they can go and train people as much as they want. And that's because of the delivery system. The actual, are you familiar with Franklin Covey, Stephen Covey, who is in India?
7 habits of.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah,
We use a very similar delivery platform that Franklin Covey uses. Very similar, where you are training people inside of an organization and then they turn and train everyone else. It's a train the trainer model. So it's a very similar model and approach. In fact, our teaching techniques are very much the same as those used by Franklin Covey. We're just teaching philanthropy. We're not teaching leadership. It's different content. But the techniques, the way adults learn, the way it's put together, it's very participative, very team-oriented, accountable, action. These are the things. This is how adults learn. Our training is not sitting in a hotel room or a meeting room somewhere, listening to someone drone on for 2 hours with slides that are making your eyes glaze over. No. This is, you're working in teams, you're doing things together, you're accomplishing things, and you develop your own action plans. That's how we do this. Very different.
use like case studies from your life.
Oh yes,
Part of the.
yes. We do, and then a lot of the teaching is, say for instance, if we're doing a group setting and we maybe have a half a dozen organizations represented in the room or more, they'll each have their own group of people, maybe 5 or 6 people that they brought. Well, then the exercises are really focused on them. They can use their own organization as the test case because they're working through it as they go. And so that they learn more about themselves and about what they need to do to be successful.
A tangential question now. You've had a lot of 30 years of experience in fundraising. What is one quality or one sort of very important attribute which you like to share with the audience, which you think is very important when any organization, one attribute which you will say for anybody to.
Well, I think perhaps the most important thing for someone who is in a nonprofit, for them to understand, is that ultimately it's not about them. And when they can really understand that it's about bringing people together to accomplish something that people couldn't do alone, and it's not about them or their mission per se, they will be successful. And, nonprofit people are usually very well motivated to do what they do. They want to do good things for people, and that's great as far as it goes. But it should never get to a point where they think they're driving the bus, because they're not. They need to understand that they're simply a part of a much bigger undertaking, and that is bringing people together that need to find a way. This is one reason why when you see, whether it's on a city basis or a county basis or even a nation basis, when areas have strong philanthropic sectors, they also have strong, healthy business sectors. The two are very much tied together. That when there's an emphasis on community spirit and philanthropy, that creates a very positive business climate, and then the economy grows. So it's very much connected.
Now we come to, you talked about, you stay in Boise, which is, I think, one of the most beautiful places on earth. America, all the cities are very beautiful. You stay right next to nature. You have a lot of, it's got a mesmerizing natural habitat. A lot of also outdoor activities. Do tell how does it relax you, and you also say what's important function of nature in enabling clarity of thinking in your work.
Well, it's very interesting that you say that, because when as I said, I grew up in the eastern part of the United States, which is much more populated. People are much closer together, and the landscape is very different. When I first moved here, the thing that really struck me was the scale and the size of everything. It is so big, whether it's open spaces, the sky, the mountains, whatever it is, everything is so huge. And it gives you a sense, well, it gives you a sense of how small you are, number one, all right. And number two, but it gives you a sense of possibilities. Oh, there's potential. There's, we can do new things, we can do bigger things. And I think if you look at the history of our country, the big thinkers have all sort of moved west. And I think part of that is because that the landscape creates that sort of environment for people. It's certainly done it for me. I've been in, I was in, when I was working for universities and when I was working for the consulting firm, I was in big cities all the time. I was traveling constantly before the virus, of course, and in big cities. I was in New York constantly. And all right, I'd be there for a couple of days. And then I was ready to leave. I'm ready to come home. And okay, fine, I'm out of there. And then I come back to where I live, because this is where I can be in touch with people in a more simple way, a more scalable way. And then also it gives me that feeling of, oh yeah, there are possibilities here. We can do things. And then the other thing is it's much more casual out here. I haven't worn I haven't worn a necktie except to wear a dinner suit, and since I moved out here, I've got a whole closet full of Brooks Brothers suits that I don't wear anymore.
This could be huge for people. I'm sure are very friendly, connected there. A small community, but is it very cohesive? How's the?
Yes. And it's a very much a live and let live sort of environment where I live. People really aren't in your face. They aren't demanding certain things. You can pretty much live your own life here, which I enjoy that as well, very much so.
I come to the aha question. This is always the last question. So, share any aha moment from your life or any message.
When I was looking at this, I thought of one,
which sort of brings back memories, joy to you whenever you think about it.
I'll say this, which is sort of an aha moment. I'm sure I'll think of this as soon as we get off. But I wish I had learned far earlier in my life that the way that you're successful is to follow your personal passion. Because when I was much younger, I was much more of a careerist. Oh, I'm going to pursue this ladder. I'm going to climb this ladder. I'm going to make all this money. Boom, boom, boom. And that was sort of driving things for a long time. And I've been pretty successful in some ways, but I think ultimately I would have been more successful, more fundamentally successful, if I had realized early on what my passions really were. And so I would encourage young people that are listening to this to pursue their passions rather than careers. The two can align, but a lot of time they don't. So that would be my parting shot.
Okay, thank you. That's very thoughtful. That's insightful. Coming. That's really true. If you're doing what you really love, I think you're more happier than. So that's.
You really are.
Thank you, Larry, for taking time and sharing about giving a very good perspective about philanthropy, specifically in the US, about your work, your launch in India, and sharing small lucid examples. I would say like over a period over the chat. Thank you. Thanks a lot for joining the Middle Road.
It's been my pleasure, Nishant, very much so. And when I come to India, I hope to meet you in person.
Sure, I look forward to it. Do let me know when you're coming.
All right.
I'll keep in touch.
All right. Thank you very much.